We are moving on to Revelation 6 today, which is the start of the seals. I always have to guess where the junior church people put this. So here I have a scroll with 7 seals on it. This kind of would have been sort of what they would have seen, would have been like. They probably would have had some kind of embossing on it. These are just blank. Usually you had a ring or something that you would emboss on it so that you would have your own signature almost like it. Interestingly, in Eastern cultures, they still kind of do that today. You don't ever sign anything in Eastern cultures. You have a stamp that you use, and it's your special stamp. And so that's kind of what you would think of in this sort of context. Following the scenes of Revelation 4 to 5, we now get to the scrolls. And so we're going to read as these seals are opened, different things happen. We must remember that it is the Lamb that's going to be opening up the seals. The only reason the Lamb has this authority stems from the fact that he was slain and has overcome. By Jesus' death and resurrection, he is capable of beginning the process of opening the seals. The first 4 seals and the first 4 trumpets and the first 4 bowls kind of go together. And so we'll read them together and study them together before we jump into the other seals and bowls and trumpets, okay? And what I mean by that is we're going to read 4 seals all together and then individually the other seals. All right, someone 1 through 8, please.
I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. His rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror, bent on conquest. When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come," and then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth, and to make them slay each other. To him was given a large sword. When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine." When the Lamb opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over the 4th of the earth to kill by the sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth.
All right, so we see the Lamb begins to open the different seals. Each seal kind of starts off the same way, and so since this is the first one, we will discuss it and then just remember. I know it's hard sometimes to remember 5 minutes ago. Remember 5 minutes ago as we open each seal. The first seal is broken. We're told that one of the living creatures gives a command of come. How does the living creature sound? Yeah, like thunder, okay? Have we seen thunder before? Have you heard thunder before in Revelation? Sorry. Where we read thunder before in Revelation so far? Tori, you were here. No, just kidding. Yeah, the throne had thunder, peals of thunder, flashes of lightning, and all that stuff. Yep. Yeah. So that was Revelation 4:5. Good job. And when we talked about that, it was always, thunder is always associated with judgment in apocalyptic literature, okay? So when they're speaking this, and it sounds like thunder, we should be hearing in the back of our minds, this is judgment that's coming, okay? So each time the seals are broken, a judgment comes. The first rider comes out, and what does he look like? A white horse holds a bow, given a crown, and he goes out conquering, right? Bent on conqueror, bent on conquest. Okay, so we have a lot of things there, and we are left ultimately with the question of who is the white rider. Okay, I'll write that down. Jesus. What else? Anybody else? What are your opinions, thoughts? You seem hesitant. You're muttering something. What are you muttering?
I hesitate to consider it Christ because it's later that he shows up on a horse and he looks different.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that. I think it's chapter 19. Jesus comes on a crown with many crowns. He looks different.
Is it Gabriel then?
Okay, maybe an angel. Okay, all right. Rome. We'll put question marks. There are several options, really two that people tend to associate with this. The first is Christ. Good job, Rebecca. So in Psalm 45, 3 through 5, an Israelite king is commanded to go forth and to conquer. And we're told that he will be riding, conquer using arrows. Hebrews 1:8 actually associates Psalm 45:6 with messianic. So if Psalm 45 is a messianic psalm, then this king that's coming and conquering with a bow, with arrows, maybe that's what we're associating here. Okay, so that's one reason why people tend to think Christ. Another one is Revelation 19:11 through 6. Christ is depicted as coming riding on a horse with crown of many crowns on his head to defeat his enemies. And so we have a very similar image. And so you say you don't like it because it looks different, right? They say it looks close enough to some people, and so they say maybe it is Christ. Another thing to keep in mind is in Revelation 14:14, Christ will sit on a white cloud with a golden crown. In that passage, he's holding weapons of war. So again, another conquest image here. Christ is called the overcomer. And in Greek, that word overcomer can be victorious one, conqueror. It can be translated several different ways, just depending on what we want to emphasize. And so the word itself has inherently the idea of conqueror in it. In the synoptics, so Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we are told that before the final judgment comes, there's going to be a preaching of the gospel. And so some people that say that this is Christ, what they're saying is it's really the gospel of Christ going out into the world before the final judgments come. And so that's what some people, when not everyone says that, but some people say that that's probably what's happening here. Another thing to keep in mind is that white, we've seen white a couple of times in Revelation. What does it typically depict when we've seen it? Huh? Purity, yeah. And so who's the most pure person that we know? Christ, God, right? And so maybe that's why we have this. Holiness or blamelessness, and we're told that the saints will get white robes or wash their robes white in the blood of Christ, which doesn't sound right in our heads, but is what is being said. So, now here's the biggest holdup on if it is Christ. It makes the first horseman different than the next three, because the next three are all judgments. And Christ, if it's the gospel of Christ, or even if it's Christ himself, it's not really a judgment idea. And so it kind of separates this from the rest. And so that's kind of the holdup, and trying to figure out if this is Christ or not. The other option is that this is either Satan or a person of a satanic influence. Okay, so you've really got two extreme options here, right? It's either Jesus or it's the devil.
No,
right.
hell wouldn't be what, pure?
Well, but here's the thing is every time you see the devil in Revelation, what is he doing? He's imitating God. And so even the whiteness doesn't matter to us because we know the devil imitates God. And he's going to put on his best. So I don't know that that's necessarily a problem. Here I have anytime we have conquering language in Revelation, it is most often used of the beasts. And so when we have this language appearing of conquering and being conquered and going out in conquest, it's the beasts that are doing the conquering. One of the important passages that probably informs this is Zechariah. Zechariah 1, 8 through 15, and in particular, Zechariah 6, 1 through 5. That's one that you should go read afterwards. It talks about 4 horsemen coming out and bringing the judgments of God. Okay? And so when we get to chapter 7, Zechariah 6 highly informs chapter 7. And so I think that Zechariah 6 is also informing this. And so we should associate all 4 of the horsemen as judgments of some sort. And so one of this is this white horse. Yep.
Wouldn't it have been Christ if it was the Lamb that opened the...
Yeah, that's 3 more things. Give me 3 more points, and then we'll get there, okay? So what? To your point of the white robes, in Revelation 12 to 13, Satan parodies Christ, right, and God. So there's 3 beasts. Why is there 3 beasts?
Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Yes, in imitation of so we have the divine Trinity and the unholy Trinity in Revelation. Okay, so there's a parody. We're going to see in chapter 7 that God seals 144,000. What does the beast do? He seals all of his people on their hands and their forehead. And you can't with the number 666, right? Like when we get there, we'll talk about it. But like he's doing the imitation of God. Everything in chapters 12, 13 is an imitation of God because he is their God, right? And so even if the whiteness doesn't matter because he's imitating Christ. In the synoptics, so Matthew, Mark, and Luke, when they talk about end time stuff, one of the things they warn about is false prophets claiming to be the Messiah. So on that day, you'll hear people say, "Here I am," or "There I am." Do not listen to them. They are not telling the truth, okay? Now to here. Christ is the one opening the scroll, and yet if we make Christ the horse, that seems kind of weird, but it's not so much of a problem as we might think. It is visionary language. You can have them both there at the same time. This is here because people argue it more than I agree with it. This one can be easily explained because it's a vision. So Jesus tells lots of parables. Tells a parable of unrighteous vineyard workers, right? And vineyard worker puts people in charge of working the vineyard, and then he sends people to come collect money, and every time they sends people, they keep killing, and so he's killing them or beating them and throwing them off. So he eventually sends his son. And when they see his son, they think to themselves, hey, here's the heir. If we kill him, it'll be ours. And so they kill him. Well, Jesus is talking about himself, but he's the one talking. And so same thing with the visions. It doesn't have to be this way. If this is Satan or a person of satanic influence, the 4th horseman serves as a summary of all of the other 3. And so it connects better the imagery of the 4 horsemen rather than having the first one be different than the other 3. And so that's why I tend to lean towards this. In Revelation 9 through 7, you're going to have demonic agents that are going to be wearing crowns that look like horsemen ready for battle. And so we do see in Revelation not just Jesus wearing crowns, but also people of demonic influence wearing crowns as well. Okay, so crowns don't necessarily mean good guys, is what I want you to point out there. Okay, so I tend to lean towards this second one. Either is fine. It just means something different. Same thing ends up happening, right? Like he's coming out, bent on conquest, whatever that means. And we kind of see some of that played out in the others as well.
But Jesus' conquest didn't happen with bows and swords. It wasn't that kind of a...
Right, but Jesus is seen with weapons of war. So, I mean, I think you can make arguments either way. I'm giving you the options because no one knows. And if they say they know, they probably don't.
Is there significance in the fact that the colors and all that is the horse, and all they describe on the rider is what the rider carries and not what the rider looks like?
Maybe. I always in my mind have made the rider look that. So this is a white person, like white, like albino white in my mind. And then the red guy is red, you know. In my head, that's always what I picture. Or black, or pale, whatever that it looks like. I know. In my head, that's just what I've always done. I don't even know if there's significance to the color other than things that we typically associate with it. Right. Or red is war and black is famine. Like those things in my mind make sense. Sorry.
No, it never says anything about what the rider looks like,
Yep.
just what they carry.
Ultimately, what I would say is it didn't matter. And that's probably why John didn't include it. I think when John doesn't include something, it's because in the end, it's not what we need to focus on. And so that's where I kind of go with this. Like, it doesn't really matter. What matters is what happens when the horse comes, right? Like the rider isn't that significant. This is the only rider that we really argue about. And really it's to determine what does it mean to conquest been on conquest. You know, what does that mean? And I don't have an answer for you. I mean, in the synoptics, you have these idea of wars and rumors of wars, and maybe this is a rumor of war type idea. So, the second rider, second seal is broken. Same language in verses 3-4. This time we have a red horse. I have red horseman because, again, in my mind, I think the horseman's red too. So, and he has come to take away peace, is what we're told. We should not necessarily limit this to physical warfare. All right, we can probably think of it as spiritual warfare as well. Anytime there are judgments in the Bible, there are usually two purposes that God uses with that. The first purpose of judgment is to purify God's people. So I think you see that throughout the Old Testament, especially in the book of Judges, right? You have this falling away of the Israelites after other gods. God brings judgment. The Israelites come back. It's a purification, a restoration, if you will. And then as the Old Testament progresses, you see, especially in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, the judgments against Israel are there so that the remnants can be saved, and not all of Israel. So it's a purification of of God's people. And so we need to recognize that. Also, it is there to bring justice to those who persecute God's people. So judgment is really twofold: purifying God's people and bringing justice to God's people. All right. And so what we we need to recognize this. And so we should be prepared to feel the effects of these judgments. So even though these judgments probably are not directed at Christians, we are going to feel them. So when there is war, we feel that, I think. Like if war really does come, we will feel it. It's been a long time since we felt war, though, right? I don't know. No one. Anybody born during World War II? Okay, I was trying to look. I'm like, I don't think so. There's only a handful of people that might have been. So, were you alive during World War II? Before, so you were alive during World War II. Okay, there you go. So, what was it like? Do you remember?
Well, there was rationing and ration books.
Yep.
You had to have stamps to buy tires and sugar and everything like that. I still got some of the old books, the antiques.
Yeah. Probably worth some money somewhere. So,
And some of those plastic.
No, they were paper.
Yeah, those were, but I was thinking of the plastic that they use for money.
The
Credit
mills.
cards?
Yes,
Mills,
yes.
there was red ones and green ones.
Oh.
Yeah,
Some
mills.
of those.
Mills. Yeah. So, it's been a long time since we've had to do that, and I think that when this type of thing happens, it becomes much more effective. Now, if you're in some of these places, excuse me, some of these places where the war actually is taking place, like they feel it, right? Syria during that whole ISIS stuff, like that was bad. It was really bad, and even some of the Ukraine right now would be really, really bad. Yeah.
The older people kept the children while the parents worked in the fence
There's a
plants.
bottle of water in there.
In the fence plants and plant victory gardens, and that's where Rosie the Riveter came.
Yeah.
They women found out they were good for, women were good for something besides having babies, that they could work in the defense plants. Well, the men went to fight. Everybody seemed to work together except the black market.
Except the black market.
Yeah, well, you always got somebody. to
Yeah,
make some
yeah.
money.
Yep.
Yeah, and we used to make mattresses to send over to the hospitals. Yeah, I remember it very well.
Yeah.
You see, I was born in 1933, so it was.
You were a teenager then.
So, yeah. Well,
Not quite. Almost.
Don't make me older.
Sorry. You're old enough to remember, so. Yeah, and we need to recognize, and I think that's what we need to understand is being a Christian doesn't mean that we're going to get to escape all this, right? Like we're going to feel this, and I think that's what John's. What's that?
We didn't feel it physically.
Right, but
We all had to work together.
you had to change your lifestyle. Like you couldn't just go. I mean, birthday tomorrow, you couldn't just go buy sugar. You had to have the stamp to buy sugar.
Out of the depression.
Yeah. So I just wanted to bring that up here. The third seal is broken, same language. And this time we have the black horseman, or black horse, I guess. I still think, dark, midnight, all of it. What's that?
You can still think that. I can understand. I can relate to that. I was just curious.
Okay. Here we see the Black Horseman brings economic instability. So I remember Germany in the 20s, in the 1920s, 1930s, their economy was so shot from World War I that you have pictures of wheelbarrows of German marks just to buy a loaf of bread, right? Because the money was worthless. All right. And that's kind of what we see here. The food is available, so it's not a famine necessarily. The food is still there. The price of the food is ridiculous. Okay. It's somewhere about, it doesn't make sense to us. Anytime the Bible includes food prices, it's because it's shockingly high. Okay. And so if you read something, you don't have to worry about the actual numbers. You just need to recognize, okay, that's probably a big number. Okay. So that's what it is. It's about 8 to 12 times the normal price. Okay. Eggs at Aldi's, we were there last week. Was that $5 now?
Well, I don't know about all these, but
Oh, yeah. They were for something when we were there, and I was like, okay, we're gonna wait a little bit, because that's really more than what we normally pay. So
I remember a customer getting like an 18 packet thing,
yeah,
and it was like $5, and she said like, the sign read $4.30. That can't be right.
well, don't trust signs right now because they may not be right. Yeah, so I think that's what I kind of picture here. Now, who is affected the most when prices like that happens? Yeah, and that's what we kind of recognize here. Poor will be affected the worst by rises in food price. When war comes, economies can suffer, especially if you're the ones in the middle of the battle, right? If you were over at Ukraine right now, I think their economy is probably in shambles. They're just barely hanging on. And the people that are hurt the most are the poor in the economy. And for Christians in John's day, they were the poor of the poor. And so if they were suffering, they were really suffering. And so they needed to recognize that this is what's going to happen. And this is kind of a warning for them more than anything else. In 6 and 7 through 8, we have the fourth seal broken, and out comes the pale horse with death on it. Here we get the rider, and Hades following behind. I always picture death on a big horse and Hades on a little pony, right? That's in my mind. I don't know. So
On the world's smallest pony.
I don't know, smallest. I don't know. So yeah, pale horse, death, and Hades. Hades is throughout the Old Testament in the Greek translation was always the residence of the dead in the Old Testament. I think what we see here is probably a summary of the other three judgments. Conquering brings war, which brings economic instability, and ultimately death rides on these heels. All right, so when these judgments come, this is what's going to happen. It's going to cause a lot of problems. All judgments. Hold on a second. So we just need to recognize that this happens. He does note that a fourth of the earth dies, and so we just have that in the back of our minds. We're going to see an escalation. So fourth here, when we get to the trumpets, it'll be a third. And then we would expect how much after that? A half, but it ends up being one. But we'll explain why that happens. But there's an escalation with each one, and we see that. So this one is a fourth. The next will be a third, and then we'll get the entire earth is affected. Before moving on, we should note that all these judgments are coming from God. The four living creatures, what are they saying as each one are opening? One word. Come. Come. And they're coming. And it's issuing with that voice of thunder, which is coming from the throne of God. The four living creatures are under the throne of God. And so these are all judgments that God is doing. And so God is summoning and is in control of this. And so we should not necessarily be surprised when these events take place in our world. So what do we learn?
Judgment's coming.
Judgment's coming. Anything else? Okay. There'll be wars as part of it, or you're saying before it? I think this is a cyclical thing that happens.
Well, when Christ comes
So I have on here, through Jesus' death and resurrection, he ushered in the start of evil agents executing his purpose of sanctification and judgment. It's a big mouthful. I don't know why I wrote that like that. Oh, you know what? It was in my commentary, and I thought it was awesome summary. That's why I put it down. So here's the thing: is these seals, they happen because Jesus has risen from the dead, right? And I would argue that they are starting now, like he's opening them now. These aren't necessarily something that's 100 years down the road or that type of thing. It happens, and these horsemen are being let loose, and we need to recognize that. Not that you should expect necessarily Jesus to come back tomorrow. You should be ready, but you don't have to necessarily expect. I don't think we should all get on our rooftops and look up to heavens and say, yes, he's coming tonight. Okay, it's be a little too cold for that. Please don't do that. Okay, what's that? Sell everything they have. Right. We need to recognize that these are happening, and it starts because of Jesus' resurrection, right? Like who is worthy to take the scroll in chapter 5, right? He is. Why? Because he's overcome, and he overcame by his death. And so we should be ready for these things when they appear, and we should not be caught off surprise by them. And they are there, they will there. So if we experience war here in the United States, we experience it as part of judgment, more than likely. I think we could probably say yes to that. But also there will be a purification of God's people within it. All right, the second scroll, or the fifth scroll, is verses 9 through 6, if someone wants to read that. 9 through 11. I don't know what I said.
When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they had maintained. They called out in a loud voice, "How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?" Then each of them was given a white robe, and they were told to wait a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and brothers who were to be killed as they had been was complete.
All right. The fifth seal is broken in verse 6. It is significantly different than the other four, right? What happens in the other four? Yeah, a horseman comes out, right? So 5, 6, and 7, something different happens. And so we kind of split them off and look at them individually. In seal 5, we see a vision of the slain saints under the altar. And I say it that way. We have a name for that. What's the name we use? Martyr. It's not necessarily, what's that?
Like Stephen who got stoned to death?
Yeah. YR? I always get, right here I don't like that Y. So, the technical term martyr doesn't really exist until after the Bible is completed. And it's passages like this that we'll talk about in a second that kind of give martyrs an elevated stance in the eyes of most Christians, which is not wrong. Like, don't hear me. I'm not saying that's not a good thing. I'm just saying in the Bible, they don't really emphasize this a lot. Not like what we do. And so slain, that's why he doesn't call them martyrs. He uses that term. They've been slain. Okay. Martyr is a word that means testimony. And so we see the word here, right? They were slain because of the word of God and the testimony that they had. That's the word martyr right there. But it's not a technical term until later. So we have the slain saints under the throne. They're martyrs due to their deaths as a result of the testimony of God's word. And so what we should see in this is that death is a very real possibility for following Jesus. All right. I try to make sure that I tell everybody that as much as possible. You might die if you follow Jesus. All right. Hopefully you don't. It's my prayer that you don't. Well, eventually you'll die, but my prayer is that you won't die because you're following Jesus. But we should be ready for it and be aware of it. And so I think that's what John's doing here. He's seeing them. They have a question for God, right? And what are they crying out? How long? How long? How long until you come back? How long until you give us vindication, right? They're wanting justice and vindication. That is an important word there, vindication. Anybody know what that means? Made right? Not really. Nope. Yeah, proving that they were right, okay? Your mom walks in and sees something broken, and she immediately thinks it's you. Why would you do this? It wasn't me. My kids are very good at that. Not me. It wasn't me. All right? But you get in trouble for it because she thinks it's you, and only to find out later that it was your brother. All right? And your mom comes to you and says, I'm sorry, right? Vindication. I was not it. I was proven right in what I said. The resurrection of Jesus is the vindication of Jesus, right? Why does it vindicate? Yes. So why was he crucified? He was crucified because he was claiming to be the Messiah. They kill him. See, he's not the Messiah. God raises from the dead and says, yes, he is, right? Like it's vindication, okay? And so that's what they're crying out. How much longer, O Lord, until we have our vindication? They're killing us because we're claiming to follow you and saying that you are true. How long until you prove them right? Because when Jesus comes back, guess what? All eyes will see and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord, both here on earth and under the earth and in heaven. All right? Everyone's going to say it at some point in time. And we will be vindicated for what we believe. All right. Verse 11, the answer is not given. How long? Yeah. You just wait, right? You just wait. No response given. Instead, they are given rewards, right? They're given robes of white, which is one of the promises given in the letters, chapters 2 to 3. And they're told, just wait, keep on waiting. Now, what are they waiting for? Who's their brothers and sisters? No, not other Christians, but in particular, other martyrs, right? And so this is a warning for John's people. We know that you have people that have died for following Jesus. There's going to be more. And it's a warning for us. There are people dying, and there's going to be more. And we should not be surprised if we are a part of that number. Just to kind of end this thing, we should note that throughout church history, the church has honored martyrs, celebrated them. That's why you see, especially in the Catholic Church, that they venerate them in ways. And I think we should show respect to martyrs. Okay, now we shouldn't necessarily pray to them. That's a different issue. But we should have respect. And we should recognize also that he says here, the end does not come until the number of martyrs are filled, right? Whatever that number is, and God knows, right? There have been more deaths of martyrdom in the Christian faith in the last 100 years than at any other time in history. And more Christians are being killed regularly throughout our world right now than at any other point added up combined. And so if we are looking and saying the end is near, we could probably say, yep, probably. A lot closer now than even 100 years ago because this number is filling up pretty quickly. And so we should be aware of that. All right, what do we learn?
Martyrs come after the 4 horsemen.
Okay, martyrs come after the 4 horsemen. Maybe. Well, that assumes that we're reading this chronologically.
Just that it's true that Jesus said who he said he was, and
Okay.
that we're gonna be, it's gonna be proven to all those who don't believe.
Okay. There's going to be vindication at some point in time. I have here, the end will come after the set number of martyrs takes place. And so if we're looking really for a sign that the end is close, we should look at how many people are dying for their faith and look at that. Again, we don't know. I mean, the number isn't told, right? Otherwise, we'd be ticking it off, right? Which is a good thing we're not told. But, yeah. All right. I want to go ahead and get through this next one because that leaves us open for long discussions the next time we meet with the 144,000. So, verse 12 through 17 is the sixth seal.
I watched as he opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of glowed hair. The whole moon turned blood red, and the stars in the sky filled the earth, as figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. The heavens receded like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the rich and the mighty, and everyone else, both slave and free, hid in caves and among the rocks of the mountains. They called to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us, hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it?
All right. The sixth seal is broken. Again, it's different from the rest. In particular, there's a lot of what's called cosmological changes, meaning changes to the universe, right? What are some of the changes here? You said perfect weather? Sorry, I misheard what you said. Earthquake, okay. Earthquakes, blood moon, sun turning dark like sackcloth, stars falling from the sky. So we see that, right? Cosmological changes, things in the universe changing. This is common in the Old Testament. So Isaiah 13, 10 through 13, 24, 1 through 6, 34, 4, Ezekiel 32, 6 through 8, Joel 2, 10, 3, 15 through 16, Habakkuk 3, 6 through 11, all have cosmological changes. All these verses mention at least 4 of the events mentioned in Revelation 6. Probably the most important one is the Isaiah 34:4, which reads like this. All the stars in the sky will be dissolved, and the heavens rolled up like a scroll. All the starry hosts will fall like withered leaves from the vine, like shriveled figs from a fig tree. Do you see that in Revelation 6 there? All right, that was Isaiah 34. And so we see a lot of the same ideas, probably the literary guide for John. The biggest question is this. I have on here, we also see this in the New Testament in places like Matthew 24, 29 and Mark 13, 34 through 35. Should we read this figuratively or literally is the question. What do you think, Mackenzie? I'm in this is a discussion. What do you guys think? Figuratively or literally? A lot figuratively? Okay. Kevin, you said both? Or Ken said both, sorry. I heard it over here, and so.
It's hard to go one way or another 100%.
None of that's out of the realms.
If we get a new heaven and new earth, why wouldn't all of it be destroyed?
Okay.
Because the sun turned black. But it still does. I mean, how would the earth survive without?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, like Alicia said, we get. I mean, in Revelation at the end, he says there is no need for a son because God and the Lamb is the Son. I don't know the answer to this. We do know from other passages that the cosmos will flee when God steps into it. And so maybe this is what is being explained here is the flee. I do have here, there's still a lot to go on though. So if we read it literally here, we got to kind of explain what's really happening, because we're in chapter 6 and there's still, 12 more chapters, 16 more chapters. And so for it to be literal here, then we have to explain what happens next. And so that's something to be aware of. They do talk about it being the great day of wrath. And so I do lean towards, we are talking about something that is catastrophic enough that people are wanting this to be over. And probably talking about the final day at this point in time. So all the other scrolls are leading up to this point, and this point is where it's occurring. We do see the reaction of the people of the earth, okay, and that is important to note, that phrase, people of the earth, is probably referencing non-Christians, okay? They are people both great and small, and their reaction is to try to hide, right? And how do they try to hide? And they ask the mountains to do what? Yeah, so they hide in caves, and they say, mountains, fall on us, because if you fall on us, we can't be found, right? That's kind of the idea. Interesting, that comes from Isaiah 2:10, and then Isaiah 2:18 through 21. In Isaiah 2, the passage is about God's judgment against idolatrous nations. And when God brings judgment against these idolatrous nations, they seek to find refuge in the things that they worshipped, which generally was the things of the earth. And so if at the heart of this is the issue of idolatry, which is worshiping the creation over the creator, then these people of the earth are seeking refuge in the creation against the creator. Save us. And what they find is that there is nothing that can save them. So no matter what you are worshiping, whether it's food, drink, sex, money, or anything else, that is worshiping creation. And in the end, it will not save you. And so they ask a very important question. What's a question that they ask? Who can withstand this wrath? Okay? So keep that in the back of your minds, because that is the question that chapter 7 tries to answer. Who can withstand this wrath? For us, idolatry is the heart of worship. The difference between God's people and the people of the earth lies in who we are worshiping. Proper worship is given to the Creator. We've already seen this in Revelation 4 through 5. We worship you because you have made all things, and in you all things hold together, have their being, is how John writes it. And so we should not seek refuge in creation. If we're seeking refuge in creation, that is idolatry. And as Christians, we cannot compromise our faith to worship what the world worships. And so the question is, are we worshiping the right things or the wrong things? All right, what can we learn? Cool. Idolatry and idolaters will be judged for whom they worship, is I think what we should focus on here. And so as Christians, we should recognize that our security and safety relies upon the Creator rather than the creation. And that is what we should emphasize there. One of the things that John's doing throughout Revelation is talking about this idea of compromising our faith. And are we willing to give in a little bit to find security? You know, he just said, the end will come when all the martyrs are filled. How many of you guys want to step up and say, hey, I'll be one of those? If that's what the Lord wants, right? But not very many people are like, yep, I'll do it so we can get Jesus back sooner, right? Like that's not what's in our minds. And so if they've just read, more people are going to die, one of the first instincts is going to be, well, maybe, what's that? I don't want to die, yeah. So what can I do to stay on earth a little bit longer? And so then John writes this next one saying, look, if you're finding trust in the things of the earth, you will not be able to stand. And so who can withstand? Who can stand on the day of wrath? That leads us into what we're going to have the next time we meet. So we are going to take a 3-week hiatus on Revelation. Next week, there is no Sunday school because it's Christmas, and we're just doing one service. The week after that is New Year's. We will have Sunday school, but the week after that, we're having a service fair, so there won't be Sunday school. So I didn't feel like having 1 week and 2 weeks off on either side, so we're just going to take 3 weeks off. We will have Sunday school. It just won't be on Revelation on January 1st. So.